Look, this isn't gonna work. I didn't sign up to babysit someone who can't even hear me.
The man's voice cut through the soft hum of the cafe. Too loud for comfort, too sharp for the kind of place built for whispers. A few heads turned. Serena Liu didn't. She only stared at her untouched cup of tea, the steam long gone, her hands folded tightly around the ceramic, as if the warmth could hide the sting in her chest. The rain hadn't stopped all evening. It drummed softly against the windows of the Bluebird Cafe, tracing silver rivers down the glass, while the city blurred beyond it. Inside, the air was warm, steeped in the smell of roasted coffee and rain-soaked pavement. A small jazz trio played in the corner, just soft enough to make conversations feel private. Serena Liu sat at the corner table by the window, her hands folded around a cooling cup of tea. She had been there for 45 minutes, waiting. Her phone screen lit up for the 5th time. No new messages. She'd rehearsed this night a dozen times in her head, imagining laughter, connection, maybe even the start of something that made her heart stop hurting. She'd chosen the red dress because her sister said it made her look brave. But sitting there alone, she felt like the color was mocking her. Too bright, too hopeful for the ache settling behind her ribs. Then, the cafe door swung open. A man in a navy jacket shook the rain from his hair and scanned the room. Serena smiled, small and cautious. That had to be him, Ethan, her blind date from the app. He spotted her, smiled back, and made his way over, phone still in hand. "You must be Serena," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. His voice was smooth, confident, the kind that filled a room easily. Serena nodded, lips curving. "Yes?" Her fingers twitched toward her phone. She'd typed out a small note earlier just in case. "Hi, I'm deaf. I can read lips well, so please just face me when you talk." She handed the note across the table with a polite smile. Ethan blinked down at it, then up at her. "Oh," he said after a pause that lasted too long. "You're actually deaf?" The way he said actually hit like a slap. Serena tilted her head slightly, still smiling, still calm. "Yes," she said aloud, her voice soft but clear. "I wear hearing aids. I can read your lips." Ethan's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of discomfort that hardened into something else. "Right," he muttered, setting his phone on the table. "I mean, I saw your message about having hearing difficulties, but I thought you meant, you know, sometimes you miss things in loud places. Not—" He gestured vaguely toward her ears. "That." The word that hung in the air like smoke. Serena felt her stomach tighten. Around them, the low hum of conversation went on, unbroken. No one else seemed to notice the way his tone sliced through her composure. "I understand if this isn't what you expected," she said gently. Ethan exhaled through his nose. "It's just not something I'm used to. You—" "No? Communication's important to me. I talk fast. I tell jokes. My friends and I, we're kind of loud. This could be exhausting." She blinked. "Exhausting?" "Yeah. I mean, always making sure you can hear me, repeating myself. What if I say something and you don't catch it? I don't want to have to—" His voice dropped into something colder. "Translate my whole life." Her throat tightened, but she forced a steady breath. "I'm a pediatric speech therapist," she said quietly. "Communication is my life. I've worked with children who can't speak at all. I promise. I'm not the difficult one." He laughed once, humorless. "You're taking this the wrong way." He picked up his phone again. "Look, I'm sure you're a great person, but this isn't what I signed up for. You should have been upfront." "I was upfront." He ignored that, scrolling idly as if she were invisible. "You're great, just not for me. I have standards." The words didn't need volume to hurt. Across the cafe, a 6-year-old boy looked up from his coloring book. He had small silver hearing aids tucked behind each ear. Next to him, his father, a tall man with gentle eyes, was stirring his coffee, his gaze slowly lifting toward the commotion. The boy tugged his sleeve and signed, "Daddy, that lady's crying." The father, Michael Rowan, turned. His jaw tightened when he saw Serena. The man across from her had already stood, tossing a few bills onto the table like he was paying for pity. "No offense," Ethan added, grabbing his coat, "but dating someone with disabilities? It's not my thing." The word disabilities landed like a stone, dropped into still water. Serena stared at her hands. Her tea had gone cold. Her reflection in the window looked smaller somehow, like she was folding in on herself. At the next table, Michael's chair scraped quietly against the floor. His son looked up, wide-eyed, as his father rose. But Michael didn't move toward Ethan. That would have been too easy, too loud. Instead, he walked to Serena's table. She didn't look up until a shadow fell across her cup. Then, movement. His hands began to shape words in the air, slowly, gently. "You deserve better." Serena froze. Her heart stuttered. He was signing. Not perfect, but fluent enough to feel like music in a world that had just gone silent again. Her eyes met his. He smiled softly, one corner of his mouth lifting, his expression saying everything his hands didn't. "He can't hear kindness," he signed next. "That's not your fault." Behind him, Ethan muttered something under his breath and pushed through the cafe door. The sound of rain swallowed his footsteps. And just like that, the air around Serena changed. The shame that had burned in her chest moments ago softened into something else, a fragile kind of gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Michael nodded once, then gestured toward the boy at his table. "That's my son Theo," he said, speaking and signing at once. "He's deaf too, 6 years old, and already better at this than I am." Theo waved from his booth, holding up his crayon drawing of a blue dinosaur. "Hi," he signed shyly. Serena's tears slipped before she could stop them. She laughed through them, wiping her cheeks. "Hi, Theo." The cafe manager, an older woman with silver hair, approached hesitantly. "Miss, I'm so sorry about what happened," she said, speaking clearly so Serena could read her lips. "That man's behavior was unacceptable. Please, your meal is on the house tonight." Serena shook her head, embarrassed, but Michael spoke before she could protest. "Thank you," he said warmly. "That's very kind." The manager smiled, glanced at Theo, and added softly, "Your son has a beautiful smile, sir, and I think he just made a friend." Theo grinned, proud of himself. Serena exhaled a shaky breath. The storm outside had eased into a soft drizzle, but inside something lighter had begun to take its place. Michael glanced toward her untouched tea. "Would you like a refill?" he asked gently. "It's better when it's hot." She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, please." As he went to the counter, Theo slid from his booth and climbed into the chair across from her. He pushed the coloring book toward her. On the page, under the dinosaur, he had written carefully in large block letters, "Be kind, be brave, be light." Her eyes burned again, but this time from something softer. Michael returned with a fresh cup of tea, setting it down in front of her. "Theo likes to leave notes for people who look sad," he said, signing alongside his words. "Says it helps the world hear better." Serena smiled through a tear. "Then he's already doing better than most adults." Michael chuckled. "Yeah, he tends to do that." They sat in quiet understanding for a moment, watching the rain trail down the glass. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled softly like a heartbeat. Serena looked at him then. Really looked. the steadiness in his eyes, the easy patience in his posture, the absence of pity. He wasn't trying to rescue her. He was simply witnessing her. And for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel broken. She felt seen. The boy signed something small, delicate. "You're pretty." Serena laughed, the sound gentle, uncertain, but real. "Thank you, Theo." Michael smiled. "He doesn't lie." The clock above the counter ticked quietly, marking the end of one storm and the start of something unnamed. Serena reached for her cup, her fingers still trembling slightly. She looked out the window again, at the blurred lights, at the rain easing into mist, and thought, maybe this night isn't ruined after all. Then quietly to herself, she signed the words back into the air. "You deserve better." She didn't know it yet, but those 3 words had already rewritten her life. Serena hadn't expected to sleep that night. Even after she'd left the Bluebird Cafe, the echo of that stranger's hands still lived behind her eyelids. The rhythm, the grace, the quiet certainty of each sign. "You deserve better." The words followed her home, into her small apartment filled with books and orchids, and into her dreams where she kept seeing that moment again, his calm eyes, the small boy's innocent smile, the soft rain against the window. She'd spent years trying to make people hear her. Tonight, someone finally listened, without sound at all. When she woke the next morning, the world felt strangely softer, like someone had turned the volume of cruelty down. She made coffee, sat by the window, and tried to tell herself it was just a fleeting kindness, a moment, nothing more. But then, as she reached into her purse for her phone, she found something that wasn't there before. A folded piece of paper, torn from a child's drawing pad. Inside, drawn in bright crayon lines, was a picture of 3 stick figures sitting at a table, one with a red dress, one with messy brown hair, one tiny with big hearing aids. Above them, in clumsy block letters, were the words, "You deserve better, Theo." Serena's breath caught. Her hand trembled as she traced the crayon letters. It wasn't just the kindness, it was the understanding. This child, who barely knew her, had seen her pain and reached out anyway. She smiled, small and sad and full, before whispering aloud, "Thank you, Theo." That weekend, she found herself back at the Bluebird Cafe. She told herself she was just craving their coffee, maybe a little closure. But when she stepped through the door, her heart knew better. There they were, at the same corner booth, the man and his son. The father, Michael, she remembered, was reading something on his tablet, glasses perched low on his nose. The boy, Theo, was coloring furiously, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth in concentration. Serena hesitated, nerves buzzing under her skin. She didn't want to intrude, but then Theo looked up, and his whole face lit up. He signed a big, excited "hi" and waved so enthusiastically that his crayon went flying across the table. Michael looked up, startled, then smiled when he saw her. That same quiet, grounding smile from before. "Serena," he said, standing halfway, "you came back?" She held up the crayon with a small laugh. He dropped his weapon. Michael chuckled, shaking his head. "He's dangerous with art supplies. Please, sit." Serena hesitated for half a heartbeat, then slid into the booth across from them. Theo pushed a coloring book toward her. Today's page featured a superhero with glowing hands. He pointed proudly. "That's me," he signed. "I help people hear light." Serena blinked. "You help people hear light?" Michael smiled softly. "He says his hearing aids make light sounds. When he wears them, he says, the world glows differently." Theo nodded fiercely. "I listen with light," he signed, then reached for another crayon. Serena felt her throat tighten. It was such a beautiful, innocent way to describe what adults so often feared. "That's incredible," she signed back. They ordered lunch together. Theo chattered between bites of grilled cheese, alternating between speech and signs, while Serena followed his hands easily. Michael occasionally translated when Theo's words stumbled, but mostly, the rhythm between them needed no fixing. Serena noticed how Michael never interrupted, never corrected. Every gesture was patience, every pause, permission. "You're very fluent," she told him after a while, her hands moving carefully. He shook his head modestly. "Fluent enough not to embarrass myself, maybe. I started learning 3 years ago. Theo was diagnosed at 3 after an ear infection went wrong. The doctor said his hearing loss might get worse with time. I didn't want him growing up without someone to talk to." There was love in every syllable of that sentence. The kind of love that built bridges quietly. Serena smiled. "That's remarkable. Most parents don't go that far." Michael shrugged. "You'd be surprised what you're capable of when silence suddenly becomes your child's first language." She looked down at Theo, who was now scribbling stars around his superhero drawing. "He's lucky to have you." Michael followed her gaze. "It's mutual." Their eyes met across the table, and for a heartbeat the whole café seemed to hush. Outside, the rain had started again, a steady rhythm on the windows, soft and insistent. Serena realized she hadn't noticed it until now. "Do you come here often?" she asked, smiling faintly. Michael nodded. "Every Saturday. It was my wife's favorite place." Serena blinked. "Your wife?" He nodded once. "She passed away 2 years ago. Car accident. I kept coming here with Theo because routine helps, and I guess it makes her feel less gone." Serena's chest ached. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Grief's just love with nowhere to go, right? So I give it to him instead." He smiled softly, nodding toward Theo. Theo looked up then, frowning at his drawing. "Daddy," he said aloud, small voice careful, "how do you spell superhero again?" Michael leaned down, guiding his son's hand gently. "Superhero. "Thanks," Theo said, then turned to Serena. "You want to draw too?" Serena laughed. "Only if you promise not to judge my stick figures." "Promise," Theo said solemnly. She took a crayon and began to draw beside him. A sun, a cup of coffee, 3 smiling faces. Theo gasped dramatically. "That's us." Michael leaned over to look. His voice softened. "It is, isn't it?" Serena blushed slightly. "Sorry, force of habit. I draw with the kids I work with at the hospital." "Oh?" "I'm a pediatric speech therapist. Most of my patients are children who are hard of hearing or nonverbal. Drawing helps them express what they can't yet say." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "That's beautiful work." She shrugged, smiling. "It's messy, loud, and full of magic on good days, and heartbreaking on the rest. But I wouldn't trade it." For a while, the 3 of them just sat there, coloring, sipping coffee, signing small things that didn't need translation. Then the cafe manager approached, recognizing them from the week before. "You 3 again," she said warmly. "Table's becoming famous." Michael grinned. "We'll start paying rent soon." The manager laughed. "Your son's drawing should be in the window. I think it's the brightest thing in here." Theo beamed, clutching his crayon like a trophy. When the manager left, Serena looked at Michael. "You know," she said, "the night we met, what you did, it meant more than you realize." He looked down, modest. "It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," she said firmly. "You didn't just stand up for me. You showed me that silence can protect, too." He met her gaze again, expression steady. "You've probably spent your whole life explaining yourself. I figured for once, maybe someone should just speak your language." Her throat constricted. Thank you? Theo was still drawing, oblivious to the quiet current flowing between them. Michael leaned back, exhaling. You know, he still talks about you, he said. Says you were the pretty lady who looked sad until she smiled. Serena laughed softly. Tell him I'm not sad anymore. I think he already knows. A pause. Long enough for the jazz from the corner speaker to drift between them. Then gently, Serena signed something small. Do you come here next Saturday too? Michael grinned, signing back. Every Saturday. Theo looked up. Can we bring her, Daddy? Michael laughed. We'll see. Please? Theo clasped his hands dramatically. Serena smiled. You might not get rid of me that easily. Theo's grin was wide enough to light the whole table. Good! The moment stretched warm and easy, like a blanket pulled from the dryer. As they gathered their things, Serena noticed Theo carefully tearing out his superhero drawing. He handed it to her. For you, he said simply. She took it carefully, eyes glistening. Thank you, Theo. He's perfect. He listens with light, Theo reminded her. And for the first time in years, Serena realized she did too. When they stepped outside, the rain had slowed to a mist again. The air smelled like wet earth and something new beginning. Michael held the door for her, smiling. See you next week? See you next week, she said, and meant it. As she walked to her car, she glanced back once. Through the window, she saw Theo laughing, Michael signing something with both hands, and for just a heartbeat, she imagined what it might feel like to sit at that table again, not as a stranger, but as part of something that sounded like home. Inside her car, she unfolded the drawing again. Under the superhero, in bright yellow crayon, Theo had added one more line. Sometimes heroes talk with their hands. Serena smiled through tears. Somewhere between humiliation and healing, she realized, her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. For the first time in years, Serena Lou looked forward to Saturday. It was strange how something as simple as a cafe booth could begin to feel like a promise. Every day that week, she caught herself thinking about the sound of Theo's laughter, the way his hands moved when he signed, the softness in Michael Rowan's eyes when he looked at his son. That quiet steadiness had stayed with her. It felt like standing near a fireplace after being out in the cold too long. The week passed in its usual blur of hospital shifts and therapy sessions. Serena worked long hours at St. Mary's Children's Hospital, guiding children through the slow miracle of speech. She was good at her job, gentle, patient, endlessly resourceful. But every evening, when the hospital halls fell silent, she found herself staring at the window reflections and thinking of that cafe, of Michael's warm voice, of Theo's small, determined hands, spelling light. Friday night, she finally gave in. She took out her favorite scarf, the blue one that matched her eyes, and smiled to herself. You're ridiculous, she murmured aloud. It's just breakfast, with a friend. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just breakfast. The next morning, she arrived 10 minutes early. Bluebird Cafe was quieter than usual. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and fresh, sunlight cutting through the windows in golden lines. Serena sat at their usual corner booth, tracing her finger along the rim of her coffee cup. She didn't have to wait long. The doorbell chimed softly, and there they were. Michael with his rolled-up sleeves and easy smile. Theo skipping beside him holding a coloring book and what looked like a folded paper airplane. Morning, Serena, Michael said, his voice warm. You beat us here. Couldn't sleep, she admitted, signing and speaking together. Too much excitement about pancakes. Theo giggled. You don't look like someone who eats pancakes, he signed playfully. You look fancy, Serena laughed. Everyone looks fancy when they're excited, she replied, her hands moving with practiced grace. Theo giggled again and climbed into the booth beside her without hesitation. Michael sat opposite, studying them both with quiet amusement. "Well," he said, "seems I've been replaced already." Theo grinned. "You talk too much, Daddy. Serena signs better." Serena tried not to blush, but Michael caught it anyway, hiding his smile behind his coffee cup. As they ordered breakfast, Theo's usual chocolate chip, pancakes, Michael's black coffee and omelet, Serena's French toast, conversation flowed like sunlight through the windows. They talked about everything and nothing. About Theo's school project on dinosaurs, about how Serena once tried to learn violin but stopped when she could no longer hear the upper notes, about Michael's work restoring old buildings. "Construction and speech therapy," Serena said, raising an eyebrow. "Not exactly the same world." "Both build things," he replied. "One builds walls, the other breaks them down." She smiled, surprised by the poetry of it. Theo, halfway through his pancakes, suddenly piped up, "Serena, do you have a husband?" Serena almost choked on her coffee. Michael groaned. "Theo." "What?" Theo said innocently, his hearing aids blinking faintly. "You told me to ask people questions if I'm curious." Michael rubbed his forehead, half embarrassed. "Maybe not that question, bud." Serena laughed, the sound soft and genuine. "It's okay," she signed to Theo. "No husband." Theo tilted his head. "Boyfriend?" She shook her head. "No, just me." Theo frowned, thinking hard. Why? Michael started to intervene, but Serena raised a hand gently. "It's fine," she said softly, "because sometimes people don't know how to listen." Theo's eyes brightened with understanding. "Like the mean man at the café?" "Yes," she said. "Like him. But not everyone is like that." Theo nodded firmly. "Daddy's not like that." Michael smiled, touched. "Thanks, kiddo." Serena watched them both, her chest tightening with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. The kind that wasn't forced or pitied, just easy. After breakfast, Theo begged them both to come see the park nearby. "There's a pond," he signed eagerly, "and ducks." Serena hesitated. She had errands, laundry, a long to-do list waiting, but when Theo looked at her like that, eyes bright and expectant, she found herself nodding. "Okay, ducks." Michael paid the bill despite her protest. "You can get the next one," he teased. "Equal opportunity pancakes." Outside, the air was crisp, sunlight glinting off wet leaves. The three of them walked together down the tree-lined path toward the park. Theo ran ahead, arms outstretched like an airplane, while Serena and Michael followed slowly behind. "You're good with him," Michael said after a while. "Most people talk at him. You talk with him." Serena smiled. "He makes it easy. He reminds me why I do what I do." Michael's expression softened. "You must be good at it. Theo's not quick to trust people." "He doesn't have to," Serena said. "He just knows who sees him." They walked in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't press or demand, the kind that hummed softly between two people who were beginning to understand each other. At the pond, Theo threw bits of bread to the ducks, laughing when they flapped and splashed. He turned to Serena suddenly, his small hands signing fast. "Do you think ducks can hear underwater?" Serena grinned. "I think they can feel it, like music through their feathers." Theo seemed delighted by the idea. "I like that," he said aloud. "Hearing with feathers." Michael laughed. "He's going to remember that one." Serena smiled. "Good, he should. It's true, in a way." Later, when Theo ran off toward the swings, Michael turned to her. "You know," he said quietly, "I wasn't sure if you'd come back after that night." She looked at him, eyes steady. "I almost didn't. I've spent most of my life walking away before people can." "What changed?" She hesitated, watching Theo swing back and forth. the sun glinting off his hearing aids like small halos. "Your hands?" she said finally. "You didn't use them to point, or pity, or apologize. You just spoke, like it was normal, like I was normal." "You are normal," he said. "Tell that to half the people I've dated." "Then they weren't listening," he said simply. Something in the directness of his voice made her chest flutter. He said it without hesitation, without caution, just truth. "Michael," she said softly, "you and Theo, you make silence feel safe." He met her gaze, sunlight reflected in his eyes. "That's all I've ever wanted it to feel like." The words lingered between them, delicate as breath. They stayed at the park until the sun began to dip low, turning everything gold. Theo finally tired out, curling up on the bench beside his father. Serena sat on the other side, watching the ducks drift lazily across the pond. She turned slightly toward him. "Do you ever get lonely?" she asked quietly. He exhaled. "Every day, but then I remember loneliness just means there's still space left to fill." She smiled at that, eyes glistening. "You say things like that a lot?" "Only when they're true." They sat there for a long time, watching the world grow softer around them. Theo stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about superheroes and pancakes. Michael tucked his jacket around his son, careful not to disturb him. Serena watched the tenderness of it, how gentle his big hands could be, the kind of gentleness that didn't come from weakness, but strength learned the hard way. "You're a good father," she whispered. He looked at her, quiet for a long moment. "I try. Most days I'm just making it up as I go." "That's what love is," she said. "Making it up as you go." When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Michael offered to walk her to her car. Theo, still drowsy, clung to his father's shoulder, thumb in his mouth. At the parking lot, Serena turned to him. "Thank you for today." "Don't thank me," he said with a smile. "Thank him." He nodded toward Theo, whose small fingers were signing sleepily against his chest. "Good night, Serena." Serena smiled, signing back softly, "Good night, Lightheart." Theo's eyes fluttered closed. "Lightheart?" Michael asked curiously. "Something he signed last week," she said. "It stuck." Michael smiled. "Fitting." They stood there a moment longer, neither wanting to say goodbye. Finally, Serena opened her car door. "Next Saturday?" she asked. "Next Saturday," he confirmed. As she drove away, she looked in the rearview mirror one last time. Michael stood there in the fading light, holding his son, watching her go, not as a stranger anymore, but as someone he'd begun to see in color. And somewhere deep inside her, in the quiet space where self-doubt used to live, something new began to take root. It wasn't hope, exactly. It was peace. By the time Saturday mornings became a ritual, Serena could no longer pretend it was coincidence. Every week, she told herself she was only stopping by for the pancakes, or to see how Theo was doing, or because Bluebird Cafe was simply the best spot in Burlington. But the truth was simpler. She went because Michael and Theo Rowan made the world feel kinder. And because lately, when she thought of home, she thought of that corner booth. The fourth Saturday started with sunlight cutting through thin curtains in Serena's apartment. She stood by the mirror, tying her hair into a loose ponytail, her reflection caught somewhere between nerves and excitement. She smiled at herself softly, almost shyly. "You're going to breakfast," she whispered. "That's all." But her heart knew better. When she reached Bluebird Cafe, Theo was already waiting by the window, face pressed to the glass. The moment he saw her, he waved both hands wildly, his grin wide enough to light the whole room. "Serena!" he shouted, voice bright. Then, hands moving fast. "You're late!" She laughed. "I'm 5 minutes early." Theo turned to his father. Daddy, she's late. Michael looked up from the menu, amused. He measures time emotionally. If he misses you, you're already late. Serena smiled, sliding into the booth. That's the best kind of math. Theo giggled, satisfied. I like your earrings, he said aloud, carefully forming each word. Thank you, Serena signed back. They sparkle like superhero light, right? Theo gasped dramatically. Yes, you remember? Of course I remember. Michael watched the exchange quietly, eyes full of something tender. It wasn't attraction alone. It was admiration, gratitude. Serena didn't talk to Theo like a patient or at him like most adults. She met him in that bright middle ground where sound and silence didn't matter. It felt, to him, like watching two languages become one heartbeat. That morning, the waitress brought 3 steaming plates of pancakes, Theo's with chocolate chips, Michael's with blueberries, and Serena's with strawberries and cream. Theo stabbed at his with theatrical precision. This one's a dinosaur egg, he announced. Serena laughed. Then I guess mine are strawberry planets. Mine are stars, Michael said dryly, because apparently no one here eats normal food. Theo looked at him with mock horror. Normal is boring, Daddy. Serena grinned. He's right. You're outnumbered. Michael raised his hands in surrender. All right, all right. Galactic breakfast it is. For the first time in a long time, laughter filled that corner booth. Not polite chuckles or forced smiles, but real belly-deep laughter, the kind that turns strangers into something more. After breakfast, Theo insisted on showing Serena his latest masterpiece, a construction paper collage of superheroes, one of which was unmistakably her. You gave me blue hair, she signed, pretending to be scandalized. Theo giggled. It's not hair, it's power. Michael laughed quietly. He's been adding you to all his stories lately. Last week you were Dr. Soundwave. Serena chuckled, touched. Dr. Soundwave. That's actually better than my real job title. What do you tell your patients you do? I tell them I help words find their way out, she said. Michael nodded slowly, considering. And who helps yours? The question hung there, simple, disarming. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at Theo, now scribbling rainbows on napkins. Maybe I'm still figuring that out, she said finally. He gave a small smile. That's fair. As the morning sun climbed higher, they left the cafe together. Theo ran ahead toward the town square, where a small street fair was setting up. Balloons, face paint, food stalls. It was chaos wrapped in color. Theo's hearing aids picked up the hum of laughter and distant music, and he turned to Serena, eyes wide. Can we stay? Michael hesitated. You've got homework? Please? Theo signed dramatically, hands clasped. Serena looked at Michael with a teasing smile. I'll vouch for him. Fair day education counts as social development. Michael sighed in defeat. Fine, but no cotton candy for breakfast. Theo jumped in victory. You said fine. Serena laughed as he ran ahead, weaving through the small crowd. He's good at negotiations. Got that from his mother, Michael said softly. Then, more quietly, she was the calm one. The reason the house didn't fall apart. Serena glanced at him. Do you talk about her often? Enough that he remembers love as something gentle. He looked down, voice softer now. Angela would have liked you. That startled her. Why? She always said kindness isn't spoken. It's noticed. Serena blinked against the sting of sudden emotion. That's beautiful. She was too, he said, then smiled to shift the air. Theo gets his mischief from her side. They spent the next hour wandering the fair. Serena and Theo played ring, toss, and tried to win a stuffed bear. Theo insisted it looked like her. Michael took pictures, candid, laughing moments, where Serena's hair caught the sunlight and Theo's grin made the whole frame feel alive. At one point, Theo grabbed Serena's hand and pulled her toward a small petting zoo. "Bunnies!" he shouted, his signs sloppy with excitement. Michael followed, shaking his head but smiling. Serena crouched beside Theo as they both fed a small white rabbit. She showed him the sign for gentle, guiding his hands carefully. His laughter bubbled out like music. Michael stood a few feet away watching. Something inside him shifted. An ache, yes, but also a quiet awe. It had been 2 years since he'd seen his son this happy with someone who wasn't family. 2 years since he'd felt that strange warmth in his chest that whispered maybe again. By noon, they sat under a maple tree eating ice cream. Theo's face, a battlefield of chocolate and joy. Serena handed him napkins while Michael leaned back, arms crossed, watching the two of them like a man memorizing a photograph he never wanted to lose. "Thank you for coming today," he said. "You didn't have to." Serena shook her head. "I wanted to." He looked down at the grass, tracing small patterns with his shoe. "You fit here, you know, with him, with us." Her heart stumbled. "Us?" He hesitated, realizing how it sounded. "I mean Theo and me. We don't meet many people who make the world quieter." She smiled softly. "Quiet can be beautiful when you're not lonely inside it." Michael met her eyes, and for a moment, something wordless passed between them. Recognition, comfort, maybe even longing. Theo broke the spell by declaring loudly, "We should have pancakes every day." Serena laughed. "Even Mondays?" "Especially Mondays," Theo said solemnly. Michael groaned. "You're conspiring against me?" "Obviously," Serena said with mock pride. "We're a team." Theo cheered. Team Pancake. They laughed until they cried. Later that evening, when Serena returned home, she found a small folded napkin in her purse. On it, in Theo's uneven handwriting, were the words Team Pancake. Serena plus Theo, Daddy Superpower, listening. She held the napkin to her chest, smiling through tears. The following week, the trio's tradition expanded. Wednesday dinners, Sunday park walks, inside jokes in both speech and sign. Theo had started calling her Miss Serena, though sometimes he forgot the miss. And Michael, he'd started texting her small things. Photos of Theo's latest drawing, a silly pun about sound and silence, a picture of a sunset captioned, "Looks like your favorite scarf." Serena's life began to fill with laughter she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Her small apartment no longer felt like exile, but like preparation for something larger, something that had room for more than loneliness. And at the heart of it all was the boy who listened with light and the man whose hands spoke with honesty. The next Saturday morning, Theo ran ahead as usual, and Michael held the door open for her. "Same table?" he asked. She smiled. "Always." They sat, ordered, and fell into the rhythm that had become theirs. When the waitress set down the pancakes, Serena caught Michael looking at her. Not in the quick, curious way people sometimes did, but in the way someone looks when they realize a routine has turned into a reason. "Michael?" she asked softly. He blinked, caught. "Yeah?" She signed and spoke at once. "You were staring." He laughed, cheeks faintly pink. "I was thinking." "About?" He met her eyes. "How some people find family by accident." Serena's smile trembled just a little. "And sometimes," she said, "those accidents save us." Theo, oblivious, clapped his hands. "Can we make a sign for Team Pancake?" Serena nodded, tears threatening. "Yes, sweetheart. Let's make one that means together." Theo grinned and raised his small hands. Between laughter, syrup, and sunlight, Serena realized that maybe, just maybe, The family she'd stopped believing in was already sitting across from her. Serena had learned that happiness didn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it came quietly, disguised as routine, like the way Michael always refilled her tea before she noticed her cup was empty, or how Theo reached for her hand first whenever they crossed the street. Weeks had turned into months, and the three of them had built something small and beautiful, something that felt safe. Yet lately, Serena had begun to feel the quiet hum of something unspoken beneath the laughter, a longing that frightened her as much as it warmed her. She told herself it was enough, what they had now. But every time Michael brushed a stray hair from her face or smiled at her across the booth, she felt the truth pulsing louder. It wasn't enough. She wanted to be part of their world, not just visit it. On Tuesday morning, her supervisor called her into the office. "Serena, you've been recommended for the pediatric deaf program in Seattle," he said, smiling. "It's one of the best facilities in the country. I know you've dreamed of running your own department someday. This could be it." Serena blinked, processing. Seattle? Full relocation. They'd cover everything. You'd start in 2 months. 2 months. 2 months to decide whether she'd leave behind the only people who'd ever made silence feel sacred. That evening, she sat in her car outside her apartment, staring at the email confirmation on her phone. It was everything she'd ever worked for. It was also everything that might break her heart. She didn't tell Michael immediately. She couldn't. How could she when Theo had started calling her my almost mom when he thought no one was listening? How could she when Michael looked at her with the kind of quiet trust that only exists between people who've both lost too much? Saturday arrived heavy with gray clouds. Serena almost didn't go to the cafe, but when Theo's voice came through the phone, small and excited, "Don't forget pancakes," she couldn't stay away. When she walked in, the air smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Michael waved her over, his eyes lighting up the way they always did. But when she smiled back, something inside her ached. "Morning," he said. "Rough week?" "Something like that," she replied, sitting down. Theo immediately slid a crayon drawing across the table. 3 stick figures again, but this time under an umbrella. "That's us," he explained. "Even when it rains, we don't get wet." Serena bit her lip, forcing a smile. "That's beautiful, Theo." Michael watched her carefully. "You okay?" She hesitated, then lied. "Just tired." The meal passed slower than usual. Theo didn't notice. He was too busy planning their next Saturday adventure. But Michael did. He saw the way Serena's hands shook slightly as she poured syrup, how she avoided his eyes when he asked about work. When they walked out of the cafe, the first drops of rain had begun to fall. Theo ran ahead to jump in puddles, and Michael handed Serena his jacket. "You've been somewhere else all morning," he said gently. She stared at the pavement. "I got a job offer." "That's great," he said, but his voice carried a question. "Seattle," she whispered. The words seemed to hang between them like fog. He was silent for a long moment. "Seattle," he repeated. "That's far?" "It's a huge opportunity," she said quickly, filling the silence. "The kind of work I've always wanted. Leading therapy programs for deaf children, research, outreach. It sounds perfect for you." He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "So, when do you leave?" "I haven't accepted yet." "But you want to?" "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "I thought I did." The rain grew heavier, tapping against the pavement like a second heartbeat. Theo, drenched but delighted, twirled under his umbrella a few feet away. "He'll miss you," Michael said quietly. "I will too." That simple confession made her chest tighten painfully. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because if you say it, I might stay for the wrong reason." Michael exhaled. "And what's the wrong reason?" Love, she said before she could stop herself. The word hung there, trembling, fragile as glass. Michael froze. Serena, I know, she said quickly, tears already forming. You're not ready. You have Theo, and your life is here, and I... He stepped closer. You think I'm not ready? You've lost enough, she whispered. You don't need more pieces to protect. The rain soaked through her scarf, plastering her hair to her neck. She couldn't look at him. But then he reached out, fingertips brushing her chin, gently turning her face toward his. His voice was low, steady. I don't need to protect more pieces, Serena. I need to find the ones I lost. Her breath hitched. He took another step, close enough that she could see raindrops clinging to his eyelashes. When Angela died, I thought my heart was buried with her, he said. Then you walked into that cafe and taught me that silence doesn't mean the end. It means beginning again. Michael, I love you. The words were quiet, almost reverent. He didn't shout them or rush them. He simply said them, like a truth he'd been waiting to breathe. Serena stared at him, stunned, tears mingling with rain. You love me? Not because you need saving, he said, and not because Theo adores you, though he does. I love you because when you sign, the world slows down enough for me to listen, because you see me, even when I forget how to speak. She laughed through tears, shaking her head. You always know the right words, only because you taught me the right language. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the cafe awning. Serena felt her resolve breaking, her walls dissolving like watercolor. I was so scared you'd say that, she whispered. Why? Because I love you too, and that means leaving will hurt. He smiled faintly. Then don't. She let out a shaky breath. You can't ask me to give up my dream. I'd never ask that, but maybe the dream isn't just work anymore. He reached up, brushing raindrops from her cheek. Maybe it's here. Maybe it's us. She stood frozen for a heartbeat, then took a step forward. Their faces were inches apart, the sound of rain surrounding them like applause. When their lips met, it wasn't dramatic. It was soft and certain, like coming home after a long journey. For a moment, time stilled. She could feel his heartbeat through his soaked shirt, steady and sure. When they pulled apart, both were laughing through the tears and rain. I've wanted to do that for weeks, she said breathlessly. I know, he said, smiling. I could tell. You're impossible. You love that about me. Maybe. Definitely. A small voice interrupted them. Ew, Theo said from behind the umbrella, grinning. Serena laughed so hard she could barely breathe. Michael ruffled his son's hair. Buddy, remember when we talked about privacy? I remember, Theo said, giggling. I just didn't promise to follow it. Serena crouched down, signing to Theo through laughter. It's okay, superhero. Sometimes love looks silly. Theo nodded, serious now. But you're not going to Seattle, right? Serena froze, glancing up at Michael. We'll see, she said softly. Maybe I already found my adventure right here. Theo smiled wide, satisfied, then pointed at the sky. Look, Mommy's crying from heaven. Michael's throat tightened. You mean Angela? Theo nodded. Happy tears. Michael pulled him close, his voice breaking. Yeah, buddy, happy tears. Serena's own eyes blurred again, the world shimmering with rain and emotion. Michael reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. We'll figure it out, he whispered. Seattle, Burlington, wherever. Just don't disappear from our story. She nodded, unable to speak. He leaned closer once more, resting his forehead against hers. I told you, he murmured. You deserve better. Serena smiled through tears. I didn't know better would look like this. They stood there beneath the storm, 3 silhouettes under a single umbrella, laughing and crying and holding on. The rain no longer felt cold. It felt like beginning. And though she hadn't decided where her future would lead, she knew one thing for certain. This was the moment her heart finally found its voice. 5 years later, the Bluebird Cafe still smelled like rain. The city had changed in little ways. New buildings, new faces, brighter lights. But that corner booth by the window remained the same. The one where a woman in a red dress once sat alone, where kindness was first signed instead of spoken, where 3 lives quietly began again. Now, on the wall above that booth, a small brass plaque gleamed, where love speaks louder than words. Inside, the cafe buzzed softly with weekend laughter. The door opened, letting in the cool breath of early autumn, and 4 figures stepping in from the drizzle. Serena Rowan, now 34, brushed raindrops from her coat. Her hair was a little longer, streaked faintly with gold from summer sun. Michael followed close behind, balancing a squirming toddler on one arm while Theo, now 11, held the door for them all. His hearing aids blinked gently beneath dark curls, and confidence radiated from him like a steady light. "Table for 4?" the hostess asked automatically, smiling when she recognized them. "Oh, right. The usual booth." Michael grinned. "Wouldn't sit anywhere else." They slid into their old seats, the same corner, the same warm lamplight, though life now filled the space in new ways. Theo took the spot beside Serena, while little Marcus, the 2-year-old, climbed into a high chair between them, his small fingers signing "Cookie" with wild enthusiasm. Serena laughed. "He only knows 5 signs and 3 are food." Michael chuckled. "He's efficient, gets that from you." "Flattery won't get you out of diaper duty." Theo made a face. Daddy does diapers?" Serena smiled, squeezing her eldest's hand. "He does everything, actually. Pancake maker, fort builder, emotional support human." Michael raised a brow. "And you, Dr. Soundwave, are the reason our house has permanent glitter embedded in the carpet." "It's called joy," she said lightly. "It's called impossible to vacuum." Theo rolled his eyes. "You 2 are gross. Can we order pancakes now?" They laughed, the kind of laughter that came from 1,000 mornings like this one. Safe, chaotic, ordinary, and precious beyond words. After breakfast, the manager, an older woman with silver hair, came over with 2 mugs of coffee on the house. "For my favorite family," she said warmly. "Every year you come back, and every year I get a little more faith in humanity." Michael smiled. "You gave us free tea once, remember? I still owe you for that." The manager shook her head. "No debt here, dear. You've repaid it 100 times over, with kindness." As she left, Serena reached across the table for Michael's hand. The gold band on her finger caught the morning light. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Every time I hear rain?" Theo leaned forward, curious. "Tell the story again?" Michael laughed. "Again? You've heard it 100 times." "Yeah, but I like when Mom tells it." Serena smiled at the word Mom. It still made her heart flutter. "Okay," she said. "Once upon a time, a very nervous woman in a red dress waited for a date who didn't deserve her time. He said something cruel, but someone at the next table heard it and decided silence wasn't good enough." Theo grinned. "Then you signed to her." Michael nodded. "I told her she deserved better." "And she stayed," Serena added, smiling at him, "because she realized she did." Theo leaned back, satisfied. Best story ever. Marcus clapped his tiny hands as if he understood every word, babbling something that sounded like bee-bird, his version of bluebird. Serena kissed the top of his head. "You're right, sweetheart. This place started everything. Later that day, they drove to the park by the waterfront, the same one where ducks still floated lazily and leaves still fell in amber spirals. Theo had a school presentation to prepare, and Serena had promised to help him rehearse. He stood by the bench, holding his note cards nervously. "Okay," he began, half speaking, half signing. "My presentation is called Heroes Who Listen Differently." Serena and Michael exchanged a glance, pride and emotion swelling in unison. Theo continued, signing more confidently as he went. "Some people think being deaf means you can't hear what matters. But my family taught me that sometimes you just need a different kind of listening. My dad learned a whole new language to talk to me. My mom," he gestured to Serena, "teaches other kids like me that they're not broken, and my baby brother's learning to sign before he can even speak." Michael's throat tightened. Serena's eyes shimmered. Theo held up a photo, one from their wedding at the park 3 years earlier. "Our family started because someone stood up for a stranger at a cafe. That's my hero story." When he finished, Serena clapped, silently, hands waving in the air. Michael followed, wiping his eyes behind a smile. Theo blushed. "Was that okay?" "Perfect," Serena whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Michael pulled him into a hug. "You make me proud every day, kiddo." Theo grinned. "I learned from the best." That evening, when the boys were asleep, Serena and Michael sat on the porch swing, watching the rain return in soft sheets. The garden glowed faintly under the porch light. Serena leaned into him, head resting on his shoulder. "Remember what you asked me that night?" he said quietly. She smiled. "Which night?" "The one after our wedding. You asked if I ever wondered what would have happened if I hadn't stood up that night." She nodded. "And you said you would have heard silence." He brushed a lock of hair from her face. "I was wrong. I think the silence would have found a way to lead me to you anyway." Serena smiled, tears in her eyes. "You still say things that make my heart ache." He squeezed her hand. "Only the good kind of ache." For a long moment, they sat in silence, just listening to the rhythm of the rain. Marcus stirred inside, murmuring softly, and Theo's nightlight flickered through his bedroom window like a tiny heartbeat of gold. "You know," Serena said, "when I got that Seattle offer, I thought my story was going to be about leaving. And instead, it became about staying." He smiled. "And building. And belonging," she added. The rain softened. The night settled around them like a blanket. Months later, the Rowan story spread further than they ever expected. The Bluebird Cafe manager told it to new couples who sat at their booth. The local news did a feature on Serena's pediatric center, Lightheart, now a thriving community hub for deaf children and their families. Michael's construction company had grown, employing several deaf contractors. His sites were quieter, calmer, built on patience and precision, and everyone said it made the work better. But for Serena and Michael, the truest legacy was the one inside their own home. Conversations in signs and laughter, drawings on the fridge labeled in 2 languages, lullabies sung with hands instead of voices. Every night before bed, Serena and Theo had a tradition. They'd touch their fingers to their hearts, then out toward each other. A sign they'd made years ago that meant different, beautiful, together. One night Marcus copied them clumsily, giggling as his tiny hands tried to form the shapes. Serena laughed, scooping him up. "Perfect," she whispered. "You're doing it perfectly." Michael stood in the doorway watching his family with that same look he'd worn the first time he'd seen Serena smile, like he'd stumbled into grace. "Hey," Serena called softly, turning to him. "Come join us." He stepped closer, folding his hands into theirs, completing the circle. "Always," he said, "on the Fifth anniversary of the night they met. They returned once more to Bluebird Cafe. The rain was falling again, gentle and familiar. Serena pressed her palm against the plaque and smiled. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked quietly. "Ethan?" Michael's voice was soft. "Sometimes. Mostly I just hope he learned how to listen." "So do I," Serena said. "Because if he hadn't been cruel, I might never have met you." Michael smiled, brushing his thumb across her hand. "Some storms lead you exactly where you're supposed to be." Theo leaned against the window, signing family. Marcus copied him with a grin. Serena looked at them both, and then at Michael. "You know," she said, "I used to think my hearing loss ended something in me. But it didn't. It just tuned my life to a different frequency, the one that led here." Michael smiled, signing the words that had started it all. "You deserve better." Serena shook her head, tears bright in her eyes, and signed back, "I found it." Outside, the rain kept falling softly, washing the world clean. Inside, 4 hands, then 6, signed the family's secret symbol in unison. Different, beautiful, together. And for a moment, it felt as though even the storm had stopped to listen.